Hello, friends. Tonight, we bring you a very special Sherlockian Conversation indeed. Never before released, the following is an interview with Mr. Jeremy Brett himself, conducted by Gary Leach in 1985 on the Baker Street set. Gary, who was at the time a young scrappy photographer who managed his way onto the Granada sets to shoot some behind-the-scenes photos, became fast friends with Jeremy and would remain close with the actor over the years, even designing the shirts that were sold at the Wyndham's Theatre in support of The Secret of Sherlock Holmes stage play, which ran from 1988 to 1989 in London's West End. Incidentally, our podcast has partnered with Gary to make a brand new run of these rare shirts available to our listeners. You can find them on our website at sherlockpodcast.com under the merch tab. This insightful and entertaining conversation might never have seen the light of day had it not been for Gary's gracious auspices and his generosity in speaking to us regarding his adventures with Mr. Brett. And we'll be sharing more of Gary's stories and insights in the days to come. But in the meantime, on behalf of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes podcast and Brett fans worldwide, Gary, we thank you. So, without further ado, we give you Gary Leach and Jeremy Brett.
First of all, it's nothing to do with the business at all. I really wanted to be a farmer, and then a rider, and then possibly steeplechasing, but I grew. And I was sent to a speech therapist because I had a very weak voice. I had a very weak R sound, very weak S sound. And that's what really got me started in the business. And I then went to Central School of Speech and Drama, basically to work on my speech. And also I wanted to be an actor, really, from about the age of 8, as an alternative to being, like any schoolboy, a jockey. And it started very badly for me because of my speech. And so I had to work very, very hard on that, harder than anybody else. And after the first year, I was just allowed through into the second and the third. But it was touch and go because my speech was that bad. And anyone who was disheartened by a speech impediment, which I basically had because I was tongue-tied, I had to have my tongue cut underneath. And I learned how to make an R sound and an S sound, and then gradually they allowed me to stay on. But it was touch and go that I was going to be allowed to stay the course.
How do you relate your training to your method of working now?
Quite a bit, because they gave me a very good grounding at Central. I had a wonderful voice teacher called, well, 3, but one specialist called Heather Black, who worked on the voice, and particularly the R sound. Heather Black, and then there was Clifford Turner, who was voice, and Cicely Berry, who was voice, B-E-R-R-Y. And the 3 of them worked very hard. And because I was so behind the others, of course, I probably would have had to work harder. And Oliver Reynolds, who was my great mentor and teacher at drama school, and among others. And we were schooled in the Stanislavski School of Acting. It's a Russian school of acting. There's a wonderful book called An Actor Prepares by Stanislavski, which means you submerge yourself into the part. You imagine and take on everything you can of the character and try and become the person so that you actually project the essence. You kind of squeeze yourself out and bring through as much of the character as you can possibly produce intuitively and through observation and through choice and selection. And that was where that started. But for most of my earlier years, of course, I was always playing those awful juveniles. Not awful, but I mean, if you play a lot of them, they do become awful. So I had to wait quite a while until I got the parts that I really wanted to play. I did have 1 or 2 marvelous breaks, like I was asked to play Hamlet in 1961, which I played at the Strand Theatre in London. And that was a breakthrough. And then, of course, the whole of the theatre scene changed in London. And gentlemen were out, and upstairs became downstairs, and downstairs became upstairs, and the Angry Young Man Brigade started, the Red Brick Theatre at the Royal Court. And I was out for quite a while. And then some very kind directors of the Royal Court, Tony Richardson being the first, followed by John Dexter, asked me to go to the Royal Court, so my career moved through that period, which was the most dangerous period I had, I think. And then in 1977, I decided to try my luck in the States. And what that did was not really produce an enormous amount in the States, but it did produce an enormous amount of work here. Ironically, I went all that way to become an American star of some kind, and to make a major movie, and all that happened was that I kept on being invited home to do better and better work in England. One being The Good Soldier, out of Granada, and then the Sherlock Holmes. And it had a remarkable effect in reverse. I was asked to play Max de Winter and Rebecca, and I'd only been there 5 months. So I came back for 5 months to make that. So really my trip to the States, what that did was to brush up my career here, which I found delicious but surprising.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in a jet plane going back and forth, but it was worth it.
How do you see the professional relationship between the actor and director?
Well, the director is everything, and he is the master. And I've been very fortunate in this particular series of films because I've had some fabulous directors. It is a liaison, a closeness and a trust which comes about between the two of you. First of all, assumption on both each other's part that you've actually done all your research and that you come prepared, that you are full of invention, that you are rested, that you are fit. I always have a very high standard as far as actors and actresses are concerned, and that is because I worked with Olivier at the National Theatre for 4 years. He assumes that actors have the bodies of gods and the voice of a full orchestra, so that they have everything at their beck and call, and I think that is what a director should expect. It was an enormous lesson that I learned from Olivier, and so that's why I concentrate on fighting, trying to be fighting fit, trying to be on top vocally, so that I'm absolutely in tune and ready. And when you and the director get together, and he's an expert and done all his research, and he's a master of his field, then it's a marriage between the two of you, a total trust. And of course you discuss back and forth, but he has the final say in everything. But with trust there's hardly a line between, because you're both working in the same direction.
If you could select any role, what would you like to play?
Well, I think that now, having played Sherlock, I thought I should now possibly move back into the classical theatre, which is where I'm mainly at home, having done so much. Time has passed, so I suppose now it has to be, I'd like to play quite a young Prospero, about a 45-year-old Prospero with a very young Miranda. I've never seen that play, funnily enough, totally magically take off yet. Not quite. I think Iago may possibly be something I should play. I don't think I'm an Othello because I don't think I can ever convince myself that I'm an Othello, but I think Iago I should probably have a crack at. I usually find that what happens is that one has ideas what one should do and one works towards that, and then they eventually happen. But I think in the immediate future, when I complete this, you wait for the profession to find out what they are going to cast you as, because they can be much more objective about you than you can yourself, and that is invariably what does happen. Somewhere, someone suddenly thinks, oh, let's get Jeremy Brett. It's odd, but they do, thank God. So however many times I have ideas, it usually is taken over by the fact that somebody's had a brighter idea, because they can, as I say, they can see me much more clearly than I can.
Well, you've answered that one. Which do you prefer, film, stage, or television?
Well, I've done so much theatre, and I must be honest that film is my passion. I love theatre, and I've done a lot. But I didn't photograph very well, I don't think, when I was younger. I think I photographed rather wetly. I looked a bit sort of sloppy, soppy, wet. Nothing was written in the face. And I remember when I did the film of My Fair Lady, and I saw some of the dailies or the rushes of that, and I didn't really like what I saw, particularly what I looked like. It looked a bit chocolate boxy, a bit pretty handsome
Yeah.
bit, and I'm therefore not really interesting. So I had to wait a while, so that was all right, because then time passed and the theatre took care of him. But now I'm enjoying film more, because when I do see all the rushes now, I'm trying to put a thumb in front of myself, so I appreciate all the work that everyone else is doing. Try to remain objective even when you're watching yourself. But I do see, with some of the films that we've completed, and I have seen, that there's more written in the face, and therefore it's more interesting, I think, to look at than it was before.
What are the main pressures of working in show business?
Oh, well, the big one is that forget, I think the hardest thing is for an actor to have a home. You must be ready to pack a bag and leave for Alaska, if it's a film or whatever, or the theatre for, say, a year, whatever, at any moment. So you don't actually root too deeply. I find that whenever time I buy somewhere, I'm never there. So, mind you, I geographically jump about a great deal, but I'm never in the country where I've got a home. And therefore, that's one of the hardest things. Thanks, Peter. That's one of the first sacrifices. But it's not really a sacrifice, because you know that when you take on the business. Also, I don't like being someone who sits still very, very much. I like to move about. But I'm waiting for that wanderlust to stop, but it hasn't stopped yet. I absolutely adore it. I mean, I don't go rushing home for the weekends. I love staying here. I like getting tuned up and ready by about Sunday lunch, ready for the next day, thinking through, and it's something which you never have, is stability. You don't have that.
Have you ever wanted to direct film or television?
I was asked that the other day, and the answer is I have directed theatre. I think that the most important thing is to know what you can do and what you can't do. I mean, always say that you can do more, but I think that directing film is something that I would be very... I now know much more about filming than I did before, say over the last 10 years, but I don't think I would actually like to direct. I wouldn't like that responsibility. I'd much rather contribute from the angle that I know most about. I'd be very nervous of actually directing film, because I'm not sufficiently trained, one. As far as the theatre's concerned, yes, but it's an enormously sad moment when the production is on, because then you've got nowhere to go. You're out. Your job's finished. Yeah. And I find that the hardest idea of being a stage director. Although the last one I did, which was in 1982, I did a production of The Tempest in Canada, in Toronto. I also played Prospero, so they couldn't throw me out. But, no, I better stay where I am. I mean, if an idea comes along of about 4 or 5 of us running a theatre, that I might be interested in, but not on my own.
Are the qualities of a TV actor different to the qualities of a theatre actor?
Well, people have a lot of theories about this. I personally don't think there's much difference. I think it's the question of direction. In a theatre, of course, you direct out to a much wider proscenium, a much wider audience. It depends. If you're working in an arena theatre, you're working through about 180 degrees, sometimes more. As far as film is concerned, you are directing it towards that proscenium arch, which is the lens, and you do more. You can be broader in your acting in a longer shot than you can in a close-up, and that's really the difference. And there's not much difference between. And I think that the parochialism, which happens very often, that people say he's a stage actor or he's a film actor, that we can't do one or the other, is a load of rubbish. And I think it's very dangerous for actors to have that happen to them. It's not inflicted by the actors, it's inflicted by the companies, and usually by the film director who say he's a stage actor, he can't do film, or he's a film actor, he can't do stage. I don't agree at all. It depends on the individual every time.
Who, if any, actor do you admire?
Robert De Niro. Immensely. In England, it varies. It depends on what people are working on. People change so much here. They fall into terrible vocal patterns, as they are at the moment at the Royal Shakespeare and at the National, where they seem to have a bleat in their voices. But there are some of my favourite actors who've become bleaters and then stop being bleaters. Alan Howard, I've seen give some brilliant performances, but then he began to bleat. Actors I admire, well, probably the two greatest actors for me have been Richardson and Olivier. They're two of my mentors. Olivier because of his daring, unbelievable courage and the danger of his work. And Richardson because he had such an immense humanity. He seemed to me to not look like an actor. Therefore I find it all the more remarkable when these extraordinary performances came out of a man who did not, to me, appear to have what one would think of as more of a country gentleman, a bank clerk, maybe a very good one. But those two, I think, were the great inspiration of my youth, anyway. Directors, Ingmar Bergman, the great Swedish director, who I've worked with only for the theatre, but I absolutely adored working with him. It's when you kind of levitate with directors, when suddenly they stretch you without bullying beyond your natural strength and take you into another space in your work. He's another. Tyrone Guthrie was another. T-Y-R-O-N-E, the great Irish director who I worked with 3 times. He was another great inspiration in my life on the directorial side.
What was the hardest lesson you had to learn in relation to your career?
I suppose failure. One's own standards are one's own standards. One never achieves them. That's agony. The committal, the total committal to it, was something that I took a little while to do. I thought I was committing completely, but I seemed to keep something a little bit back just in case I failed. And therefore I've only started to risk everything, I suppose, about the last 15 years. Less, 10.
Did you have any previous jobs before you went into acting?
No, I knew by the time I got to 17, I knew what I wanted to do, if I could get my speech together. And I sometimes regret that. I think if we are a mirror up to nature, one should have as much nature as one possibly can. And I think it's terribly important for actors to stop. When actors not working, they say is resting. I don't mean that, I mean stop. Now, when I finished the National in 1971, after 4 years, I went off to South America for 6 months, hitchhiking. And if I've got the guts, and I hope I have, and I don't see why I shouldn't have, I can do the same thing after this. Maybe not 6 months, but say 4. But get right away. Specialization is wonderful, but at the same time, if you are meant to be a mirror up to nature, as Hamlet says to the players, you've got to make sure your nature is intact. Also, I think after this part, which is fairly an obsessive role to play, he's not the easiest person to live with as an actor. He is very obsessive and very dark. And it's very exciting, but at the same time, it would be good for me to stop altogether, I think.
It's the 117th actor to play Holmes. Are there any specific changes in his character you've made?
Now, that's awfully hard for me to answer, Barry, because I'm playing it. It's very hard to be objective. I think if there's any difference, it's largely due to Granada. And that is that I've been given a great luxury in we made 16 films nearly. And that is I've been given 2 weeks rehearsal. Also, I was given a year, basically, to prepare and to research. And they've given me time. What Granada did was when I started, I had this year to research, and I began to realize that so many of the people who had done it before had all done derivatives, not the actual original stories. So I put to them, I said, why don't we do the original stories? And then the great doubt about that was, if they've not been done before, well, maybe they're not good enough. Why have people changed them? And gradually, over the first year and a half, that became apparent that they were going to work. And every time I could, I said, can we go back to the book? And 8 times out of 10 we did. And so that has been the exciting part. Also, I think Michael Cox's main interest was to put literature straight in regard to the relationship between Watson and Holmes, and to present Watson not as a bumbling buffoon who was running around puffing behind, but someone who was very keen on the job and a man of enormous energy, enthusiasm, compassion, a soldier and a doctor, and a man only about 12 points below Holmes, to balance and try and get that relationship right. And I think the only thing that I am aware that has happened is that relationship has worked, I think, to a large degree. It has shown Watson in a new light, and I hope that by doing that it's also shown Holmes in a new light, insofar as the fact that you must remember in the books it's written in the first person by Watson. But when you actually bring it into flesh and blood, you are actually able to relate in a different way. And slowly, I hope that as you watch the films, you realize that Holmes leans on Watson more than usual. He can't say thank you. He's very brusque. He's very quick. If his mind has changed course, it happens so quickly that he's inclined to look rude because he's actually left the scene. But I hope that there's another side that Holmes comes through, that there is a vulnerability. He is susceptible. He's held them all under bay for his special subject. But that, of course, if you do that, you become a deformed person. You are holding something down. And the cracks in the marble, as I think I like to call it, there's this marble figure of absolute perfect marble. But you hope that, without changing a line, that you see a vulnerability in him, like a crack, a vein in the marble, that you see the man under stress, the man on fire, the man depressed, the man in need, the man disturbed, that he's not just the automaton, the brilliant brain, but if you actually look more closely, you see a fragility and the flesh and blood.
Do you think your role as Sherlock Holmes on television has partially made the interest in Holmes remain so strong throughout all ages of people?
I think it's done. That's probably the thing that I'm happiest about. I am told, and I gather from certain people I've met, that people are now going back to reading Doyle. I've heard this from the Baker Street Irregulars, the Science Society, and the Crowder School Society in the States. And what's happening is that people, because of these, are going back to the original stories, which is good. I mean, first time, probably, that television's actually taking people back to literature instead of the other way around. I think that Holmes was going through a fairly rough period. He'd been parodied quite a bit. And I think that by doing the originals, I think that's brought it more into light. I think people are more intrigued than they've been for quite some while. That's thrilling. Because the most important thing is that when you're playing this character is to remember that, of course, if no one's read any of the stories at all, that, of course, they're thrillers. He's also a man to be emulated, I think, to a degree, not so much his habits. Chemistry can be dangerous, cocaine is not good, but he does fight for the good and for the law in his own brilliantly specialized way, which is, I think, the thing that makes him so fascinating, is the way that he does it. And he can be emulated. I mean, you can become a great observer of minutiae. And if you do look through a magnifying glass, you do see another world. And he is a specialist in minutiae, and that is something which we forget occasionally. And he's a man, I think, I think he's great fun. I never thought so at the beginning. I do now. That changed. And I think that he is he's a fascinating man, and he's much more fun than I realized, because he's so quick. And I think that is very stimulating. And that I didn't realize until just recently.
Did you have any worries about playing Holmes?
Yes, I didn't want to play him. I thought it might be the end of everything. I just thought, well, it's been done. And when I took on Max de Winter and Rebecca, that was another part that Olivier had made his own. And yes, I was very frightened indeed. I couldn't see what I could bring that was anything that hadn't already been done until I started to study it. As an actor, not as a student, which I did, but to study as an actor. And I realized, of course, that there is something. We all bring something different. Anybody who plays it will bring something different. And then I suddenly realized that they hadn't done the original stories, and that what could I... And it grew from that, and my confidence began to grow as well. And then, when it was received so well, that also did my confidence good, which meant that I had more confidence in my choices, and I was more daring. And I think I'm more daring now than I've been. And so I'm still growing in the part.
What other major roles in television have you played?
Well, I've been spoilt rotten, really, Barry. I've been terribly spoilt as an actor. I've had the most incredibly blessed career. I've done so many things. I've done, Danilo in The Merry Widow. And when it was singing, I got paid to sing. I don't know how I managed to, why they did that, but that was wonderful. Max de Winter, Joseph Surface in School for Scandal, Jack Absolute and The Rivals. These are all for television. In the theatre, I've done about 20 West End plays. I've done about 9 major parts of the National Theatre. I played Orlando in The All Male As You Like It. Under Olivier's banner, I played Barone in Love's Labour's Lost, Che Guevara in McCruen's Guevara. In 1969, when at the Royal Court, I played Peter in The Kitchen. El Somero in The Changeling by Thomas Middleton. And I've been inundated with marvellous, wonderful parts. And I'm one of the luckiest actors I know. I'm touching wood as I say. But it's really been... I've been very, very spoiled.
Any particular role you've played that you'd like to do again?
Well, I can only get it better, I think, the next time. Or one comes in at it from another angle. Rosmer, in Rosmer's Home, I think the first time was one way. I would play it another way now. Age changes things, therefore Hamlet's gone, really. But I would love to have another go at Hamlet, but it would be a different Hamlet. The last time I put my mother as the centre of my passion. I think I'll put my father at the centre of my passion this time. But that's really looking backward. I think that there's so many parts to play. And as I say, it's always from other people's imagination. And if somebody asked me to play a part that I'd played before, I wouldn't say no. It would be depending on what angle they were coming at it from. I do want to play Prospero again, because I love the play so much. And one of the great joys about that play is, like with so many plays, another one I remember called A Month in the Country, which I did with Ingrid Bergman and Michael Redgrave and Emlyn Williams by Turgenev. I remember I was playing Belyaev, the tutor, the young tutor in that. And there are plays that when you're walking towards the theatre in the evening, as you get nearer to the theatre, your pace grows because you're so excited to be doing it. And that's one. Hamlet's another. Although Hamlet's an enormous burden to play, as I did, 8 times a week, because it's enormous. It's like doing The Ring. for Houghton's Ring. It's an immense orchestration. And two shows on Thursdays and Saturdays, which I was doing, I used to find at the end of the week a kind of nightmare, because it was such an enormous trip. Otherwise, I think I'll let new parts come to me.
Have you ever performed alongside David directly before?
No, neither. I'd not seen David really before. Edward, we were in the same company at the National, but in different parts of the company. He was in one company, I was in another. So no, I haven't. That was good, because it's always good to have new people. And the change of cast has been good for me, too. I wasn't sure about that when we started, but it is good, because it means that you use something other automatically in your relationships.
When were you approached about the role of Sherlock Holmes?
In February of 1982, I was asked. And it started April of 83, which meant that I had that time to research, which was wonderful. That was one of the most marvelous things of all, that I had time to do my homework.
Did you find the role challenging to play?
Terrifying. The thing is, if you're trying to play a genius, what do you do? I mean, it's hopeless. We're all just blobs, you know. I mean, I'm a blob, and how do I look as though I've got the brain of a genius? I mean, it's an impossibility to... You just have to run... I remember someone saying about the part of St. Joan, how do you play a saint? You just have to say, I am a saint, and go and play it. I found that the beginning... the actual quickness and change of thought and the look particularly important. And I think I made him... I blanched myself white and darkened my hair to look as near to the Sidney Paget drawing as I possibly can. Almost clownish in a way, to remove him from a certain center of reality, because I couldn't see very much of me that fitted. I remember one critic said, I suppose Jeremy Brett got the part because he's got a big nose. Well, that's one way of looking at it. That's true. I mean, you can't really do it with a snub nose, I suppose. But at the same time, there must be other reasons, and I couldn't see them to begin with at all. So I was very unsure, indeed, about the look, about how I was going to walk. And gradually, I think over that time, I began to realize that, of course, that I had to use much more of me than I realized. And it was that sifting away from what I'd laid onto myself. Well, I kept the makeup, because I think the makeup has to be lean, hungry, like an animal, like a tiger, as quick as a flash, brilliant rapist, with a rapier. This tremendous magnesium energy, which falls apart when it's not working. That I can always relate to, because that's what actors do. They fall apart when they're not working, and then they're on fire when they are. So that works out very well with Holmes, because that's what happens with him. But it's the tenacity of driving him forward, which on a daily basis, he very seldom lets the grass grow under his feet. He moves, when he is moving, very fast indeed. That I found very challenging and very exciting. The speed of thought is something which one has to pray comes across, because all one can do is to hope that they think that it is, because one's as slow as everybody else.
Well, do you have any personal views about other portrayals of Holmes, Basil Rathbone, Tom Baker?
Well, I think Rathbone looks the most like him of all. I think probably, although I never saw his performance, I hear that John Wood was the best, probably the best Holmes. And I can imagine that, because he has a magnesium thing about him as a person. Not really having been very interested in the character before. I found him a cold, rather aloof person, someone who always got it right, and that wasn't really interesting. I didn't realize how often he failed until I started to study him. And there are so many failures. In The Dancing Men, his client's murdered, and to be thrown over the Reichenbach Falls isn't exactly... or get even to the edge of the Reichenbach Falls, not to be thrown over, as we know, is a little foolish. I didn't realize the foibles and the human qualities within him. The ones I would think Robert Stevens, I thought was marvellous in the Billy Wilder film, although I think the film story went off kilter. I think probably Peter Cushing was very near, but a little too nice for me. It's still open. I mean, it's still open. And after me, there'll be more.
Well, have you been surprised at the programme's popularity?
Well, you see, I suppose because I'm so old, I'm just so grateful, really. I mean, the thing about it is, if you've been bashing away like I have, I'm 50 and I've been bashing away now since I came into the business when I was 17 and a half. And it's more relief than anything else. I mean, I am thrilled to bits.
Do you find the confined space and heat from the lights difficult to work under?
No, you get used to that. Also, the crew become your family. I mean, I've got so many people in the studios now that I've worked with on more than one occasion, and directors too. But in actual fact, that's a shortcut. I find it. The concentration of this very room we're talking in now. I love working in here, and every time we do a scene that's being shot in here, I love it because it's such a concentrated space to work in. And no, I don't find I adore filming. And that's the way it always has to be.
Have you ever been asked to speak to any Conan Doyle Appreciation Society about your role?
Yes. I'm reluctant to do that because they always know so much more than I do. All one can do is to say that when I leave the studio, I have to hang that cap up. I'm living with him on a daily basis. It's not my hobby that I pick up. I'm actually dedicated the last 2.5 years to playing him. Basically, nothing else at all. I did do a play on Broadway this summer, but that was a wonderful light comedy, which was a marvellous change of pace for me. But I try not to think about him apart from what I'm going to be doing the next day, and maybe the next film outside. I try to keep my social life away from him, because I'm absolutely inundated with him, which is the only way to do it, but not yet. Maybe later.
Would you do a film as Holmes, a feature film, or as
I
another
think by the time I get to the end of this, Gary, I think I'll probably have to hang up my deer stalker and my pipes, because I must play other parts, otherwise, it's been wonderful, but I think that if there was a feature film, and there is talk of one, then yes, maybe I would, but I'd have to have a break first and do something else, because otherwise it's going to be too long.
Yeah.
And I will have done 20 stories, and that's a fair whack out of any Doyle. And there are other actors who must have a go. I'm cornering the market, and that's not good.
Did you have any fears about becoming typecast as Holmes?
I don't think that happens anymore. Also, the fact is that, of course, when I take this makeup off and the black out of my hair, I don't look like him at all. So I don't actually get... If I'm recognized, it's usually from my voice, but not certainly from the look.
You obviously must have read all the stories. Which one's your favourite?
My favourite?
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, I like the Dancing Men. I love the jigsaw puzzle. I love the puzzle of the alphabet. I find it such fun. I love the ones with deduction. I've got a rather soft spot for the Norwood Builder, where he thinks he's going wrong and thinks that he's failed until the very last minute. I do like the human side of him. I like the... I would think probably The Sign of Fall is a mild story too.
Do you criticise yourself if you watch yourself on television, saying perhaps you could have done that better? Or...
That's the worst part, because you can only fail yourself.
Yeah.
And it's never what you want. It can be near, but never it. There are moments when you're surprised by what this magic lantern has achieved by coming and catching something. Like there's a moment in the Blue Carbuncle when they're both looking at the Blue Carbuncle and talking about it. which is filmic magic, nothing to do with the actors. It's filmic magic. But the actual business of what I do, I mean, I'm just a blob. I shave this face every day, like you shave yours. And what I think and feel inside sometimes doesn't get any further than the back of my eye. It doesn't come through. And that I find terribly depressing. You can have wonderful things going on inside and nothing reads at all. And that's very depressing. No, I'm a constant criticizer. Usually it's because it's too slow. Usually I keep on thinking I'm being too slow. He's not quick enough. I cannot... The genius, of course, eludes all the time, and that's my constant frustration. If I can fool anyone, I'm thrilled, but I don't fool me. But that's the magic between film and face. If you're the flesh, what can come through? And the great actors can do it, and I'm far from that.
Do your friends and family have any views about your role as Holmes?
Yes, I think they'd like me to do less, so they saw me more. It is absolutely all enveloping. You don't have a great deal of spare time. At the weekends, I don't choose to go back. I usually stay where I am because I'm resting and building up my strength for the next week. And I think that's to do with, if you get the chance to play something like Holmes in your career, don't muck it up. Do your very, very best, because you're going to be a long time living with it, especially if it's on film, because there it is. And when I hear things like the fact that it's been bought for home video in the States, and we've just opened in Japan and China and over 50 countries, this is a unique opportunity, and therefore everything has to go, really. And sort of like going into the army. You say, right, well, I will commit myself, or the church, or studying for law. You say, I will give everything I've got to it, and then pick up the bits afterwards and hope that everyone's waited.
Your family, your brothers and sisters, are they in show business?
No, my eldest brother's a painter, my second brother's a painter, and my third brother's an architect. And they're quite bemused. They're all older than I am. They're quite bemused and I think quite tickled, and we don't talk about it very much. But I think they're quite tickled. They're quite relieved that I'm employed. One, because I'm an actor. And two, I think they're quite tickled. Yes, I don't think they mind.
Where were you born?
Warwickshire, a little village called Berksville. And my father was a soldier. And my mother was a Quaker by her father. Her mother was a Quaker. And I think she wanted to have her youngest child, which I was, to be something within the arts. And I was very much encouraged. If I sang, I said, which I did, to sing more. I was very cherished in that way. So anything, no one said no. They said, yes, go on, do more. So from that point of view, I had a flying start.
When is your birthday?
November 3rd.
How tall are you?
6'1".
Your weight?
Weight, I would think, probably now in English, I would think it should be dead on 12. That's what I had to try.
Where do you live?
I've just sold a home in California, but I've got an apartment there now. I have a small flat in London. Neither of which I'm in, of course. I'm with the Britannia.
What hobbies do you have in your spare time?
Well, God knows, it's my spare time. Smoking, certainly. Archery is one of my great hobbies. I haven't had a lot of space for that, so I haven't been practicing that very much. Riding I adore. I haven't had much time to do that, and you shouldn't really do riding when you're doing this, because if you come off and crack your skull, you're not going to be much use the next day. Everything's had to go. All that's had to go by the board for the moment.
What sort of music do you enjoy?
Every kind. Classical, modern, top of the pops. I love to be listening to find out what's happening. There's usually about 12 that I adore. Everything. Music I absolutely adore.
Who was your childhood hero?
My father. He was a great soldier.
Are you superstitious?
No. If I am, I try and get rid of it. I don't believe in any of that. I defy my stars whenever I possibly can.
What are your likes and dislikes?
Ah, well, I loathe my laziness. I loathe my indulgences. I like little bits, but I'm immensely outgoing and gregarious, very unlike Holmes, and I'm far too fond of smoking, far too fond of a good bottle of champagne in the evening. I love the good life. All weaknesses, but can't do much about that. Try to curb all of them. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not.